The martens ran the snow gap because the forest had been cut open by winter. The gap was not wide, only a few body lengths across, but it was absolute. A windfall years earlier had dropped several spruce across a narrow draw, and storms since had kept the opening clear of regrowth. In summer, it filled with grass and low brush. In winter, it became something else entirely, a clean slice of white where snow drifted deep and even, untouched by branch or shadow. Cover ended there. The marten paused at the edge, body low and elongated, dark fur nearly black against the snow-packed forest floor. Frost clung lightly to his whiskers. His chest rose and fell quickly, not from exertion, but from attention. His ears were small, rounded, barely visible, tuned to sounds most animals never separated from silence. He did not hesitate because he was afraid. He hesitated because the gap was honest. Snow erased complexity. It flattened choices. It removed the half cover that let small predators correct mistakes mid-run. Once he entered the gap, there would be no adjustment, only commitment. The marten leaned forward and sniffed. Cold pressed scent flat, pinning it close to the surface. What remained told little. Old vole trails buried beneath drifts, the mineral smell of frozen soil, faint resin carried from broken spruce trunks. No recent danger. That did not mean safety. He moved back a step and waited. Martens did not rush clean spaces. They used edges, roots, shadows. Snow gaps punished those who mistook speed for invisibility. The forest behind him was layered and forgiving. Fallen logs, snow-laden branches, cavities beneath drifts where tunnels ran unseen. The gap ahead was open and smooth, shaped by wind into a shallow bowl that reflected sound and light equally. A raven crossed overhead, wings beating slow and deliberate, its shadow sliding cleanly across the snow and vanishing just as cleanly. The marten watched the shadow, not the bird. Nothing followed it. The decision came not as urgency, but alignment. The marten lowered his body further, compressing muscle along spine and hips. His tail lifted slightly, not for balance yet, but readiness. His paws dug into snow at the edge, finding purchase where crust thickened under the shelter of trees. He ran, not a sprint, a controlled burst. His body flowed into the gap, dark against white, feet barely breaking surface crust as he crossed. Each step landed precisely where snow would hold, momentum smooth and continuous. He did not look left or right. He did not slow. Halfway across, sound changed. The forest behind him went quiet in a different way, not muffled, but distant. The open gap swallowed noise, reflecting it upward instead of outward. His own breath sounded louder to him than it should have. He did not falter. On the far side, he leapt cleanly into cover, vanishing beneath a low spruce branch heavy with snow. The branch dumped its load behind him as he passed, collapsing the track he had just made. The cover ended clean, and then returned. The marten stayed still beneath the branch, listening. Snow settled with a soft, cascading hiss. The gap lay quiet again, unbroken except for a faint disturbance already losing shape. Wind moved lightly across its surface, smoothing the evidence. Nothing followed. No owl shadow passed. No fox appeared at the edge. No sound came from above or behind. The marten waited longer anyway. Patience here was not caution. It was habit. He moved on through denser forest, climbing briefly onto a fallen trunk, then slipping into a tunnel beneath snow where mice had packed the space with heat and scent. Here, the world behaved normally again. Sound softened, smell layered, mistakes could be corrected. He hunted briefly, pinning a vole beneath the snow with a precise downward strike, killing and eating quickly, efficiently. The meal was small but warm, enough to justify the risk he had taken. As he finished, the wind shifted slightly. The snow gap behind him began to fill again, its edges blurring, cover slowly returning to what winter allowed. By morning, the gap would look no different than the rest of the forest floor. But the marten would remember it, not as danger, not as obstacle, but as a place where decisions had to be finished before movement began. Snow did not forgive hesitation, it rewarded clarity, and when the cover ended clean, the marten had already committed, crossing in one motion, leaving nothing behind but a lesson already fading under white. The forest did not close the snow gap overnight. Cold settled deeper, tightening the crust, polishing the surface into something smoother and louder. Wind had not yet returned to soften edges or blur tracks. The opening remained exactly what it had been the day before, clean, white, exposed. The martens approached it again from the opposite side before dawn. This time there were two. They moved separately but with awareness, not touching, not signalling, each keeping a line that allowed retreat without collision. Martens tolerated one another in winter only where food density allowed it. Here, the gap forced cooperation of distance rather than intent. The first marten reached the edge and stopped. The second halted several body lengths back, shadowed by a fallen birch whose bark peeled in pale curls. Neither rushed the other. Neither claimed priority. The gap belonged to neither of them. Snow gaps did not belong to anyone. The lead marten lowered his head and listened. The surface had changed. Where yesterday the snow had absorbed sound, today it returned it faintly, a thin echo of breath and shifting weight. The crust had hardened enough to carry bodies cleanly, but also to announce them. Above, the sky was clear. That mattered. Owls hunted best on nights like this. The martens waited. Minutes passed. A faint shape crossed high above, silent, wide, deliberate. An owl glided along the tree line, following the edge of the gap rather than crossing it. It vanished into darkness without striking. The martens did not move. Waiting did not mean the threat was gone. It meant the timing had changed. Cold pressed harder. Frost crept along whiskers. Muscles held tension without release. Then the wind shifted. Not strong, just enough. Snow crystals lifted from the gap's surface and drifted sideways, softening the polished crust and scattering light. Sound dulled slightly, contrast weakened. The lead marten moved. This time he ran faster. The gap demanded it. He burst into the open, body low, tail streaming behind, feet drumming softly but decisively across the crust. Halfway through, the crust cracked, not through, but loud enough to matter. The second marten followed immediately, not chasing, not copying, but using the first's disruption to mask his own sound. They crossed in sequence, two dark shapes slicing white, each disappearing into opposite shadows beneath different trees. The cover ended clean again, and then returned, partially, unevenly, enough. On the far side, the lead marten did not stop. He climbed immediately, up the trunk of a leaning spruce, then out along a snow-draped branch before dropping into a tangle of blowdown where tunnels ran thick and warm beneath the surface. Here, the forest held scent again. Here, sound bent and softened. The second marten chose a different route, diving beneath a drift where old roots formed a lattice. They did not reunite. They did not need to. Later, as pale light began to seep into the forest, the snow gap lay empty once more. Two sets of tracks crossed it briefly, already blurring at the edges as wind resumed its patient work. By midday, the opening would look untouched again, its danger reset, its promise renewed. The martens moved deeper into cover, hunting separately now, using spaces where snow broke into complexity again. They would cross other gaps. They would wait again, but they would never mistake white for safety or speed for invisibility. Snow gaps did not punish those who crossed them, they punished those who paused. And when cover ended clean, the martens had already learned to finish the decision before the run began. Morning made the snow gap dangerous in a different way. Light slid into the forest low and flat, catching on every exposed surface and turning white into glare. Shadows pulled tight beneath branches and logs, shrinking into thin lines that offered no forgiveness. What had been invisible at night became unmistakable now. The snow gap did not close. It waited. The martens did not approach it directly. They moved through the forest on parallel routes, each testing the day's new rules in smaller spaces first, short openings between trunks, shallow drifts where snow thinned over roots, places where light fell unevenly. Winter mornings demanded calibration before commitment. The lead marten reached a low rise and stopped. From here he could see the gap clearly. It looked harmless. That was the problem. The surface was smooth again, hardened by cold, softened only at the edges where needles and bark fragments had fallen. No drifting snow moved across it now. No wind disturbed the light. The opening reflected the sky cleanly, throwing brightness upward into the trees. Above it, nothing moved. That did not mean nothing watched. The marten crouched low and listened. Daytime sound travelled differently. Snow reflected it outward instead of swallowing it. Every shift of weight carried farther than expected. The forest behind him rustled softly as branches warmed and released frost. He did not run. Not yet. Instead, he moved sideways along the edge of the gap, staying just inside cover, testing how light behaved as he shifted. His dark body vanished against bark and shadow, then reappeared instantly when he edged too far forward. The boundary was exact. There would be no blur today. The marten waited for something to change. It did not. The decision came from above. A shadow crossed the snow, wide, brief, unmistakable. An owl passed overhead, not low enough to strike, but close enough to confirm what the light already suggested. The gap was active. The marten withdrew without sound, backing into cover the way he had come, choosing patience over crossing. Hunger pressed faintly, but not enough to argue. He did not return that way. Instead, he turned downslope where the land folded inward, following a route where fallen trees had broken the snow into ridges and pockets. Here, white fractured into layers again. Here, cover did not end cleanly, it dissolved gradually. He crossed there without pause. By midday, the sun softened the forest. Snow loosened, crust weakened, shadows stretched again as light shifted angle. The gap began to change, not closing, but losing its sharpness. Edges blurred. Contrast dropped. The martens passed near it again later, separately, without stopping. Neither crossed. They did not need to. Places that demanded perfection were only useful when they offered advantage in return. This one now offered only exposure. The forest provided better answers. As afternoon settled, wind returned. Light snow lifted and drifted across the gap, breaking its mirror surface into moving texture. Sound dulled. Contrast softened. The opening was becoming negotiable again. One marten crossed then, not fast, not slow, but smoothly, using the moment when white stopped acting like a signal and started behaving like ground again. He vanished into cover without sound. The other followed much later, choosing a different angle, a different moment. The gap remained, but it no longer commanded attention. By evening, the snow gap looked ordinary again. Another part of the forest floor. Another place where snow lay deeper and smoother than elsewhere. To an animal passing without memory, it would seem safe enough. The martens did not think that way. They carried no image of the gap forward, only a rule. When cover ends clean, timing matters more than speed. When white stops hiding, wait. When it starts to lie again, move. The forest darkened. Snow settled. And the gap waited for the next body that would mistake stillness for safety.